Some wild news this morning. 13 members of an anti-government militia were charged in a plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. Whitmer gave a speech shortly after the charges were announced where she denounced President Trump for not condemning far-right hate groups.
Just last week, the President of the United States stood before the American people and refused to condemn white supremacists and hate groups like these two Michigan militia groups. Stand back and stand by, he told them. Stand back and stand by. Hate groups heard the president's words not as a rebuke, but as a rallying cry, as a call to action. When our leaders speak, their words matter. They carry weight. When our leaders meet with, encourage, or fraternize with domestic terrorists, they legitimize their actions, and they are complicit.
Hill reporter Jonathan Easley and principal at the Raven Group, Eduardo Rodriguez. They join us now to discuss. Gents, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Jonathan, let's start with you here on all these happenings in Michigan. Obviously, this comes, 25 days ahead of the election. I mean, it's obviously, a very nefarious, crazy kind of plot. These are some real anarchist extremists. I was just looking. The ringleader hates Trump, calls him a tyrant. He's like one of the original 1990s right-wing anti-government militia guys. Do you think this is going to have an impact on the state? What do you think?
Well, I mean, Governor Whitmer certainly is trying to make it a political issue. It's pretty amazing to see her go up and speak about this in the hours after it became public, blaming President Trump for stoking this sort of this plot against her. Michigan is obviously a battleground. We're seeing Joe Biden pull away in some of these Midwest and Rust Belt states. It's I've talked to Republicans who think Michigan is already a lost cause. But it's pretty dispiriting, really, to see how quickly things like this became political. Because I mean, it's an astonishing story. I mean, just reading that affidavit, it's quite scary. I mean, we saw sort of a blow up earlier, shortly after the pandemic took hold, with protesters out there at the state capitol. Some of them armed, protesting some of the shutdown that was going on in that. So, I mean, we're 25 days out from an election. It's going to be political. Trump's trying to fight back here, but, Michigan looks like it's pulling away from him anyway, I think.
Yeah, well, and Gretchen Whitmer, much more popular in the state of Michigan than President Trump is at this point. Of course, he responded on Twitter. He said, this is a little bit lengthy, but I'm going to read it for you guys. Governor Whitmer of Michigan has done a terrible job. She locked down her state for everyone except her husband's boating activities. The federal government provided tremendous help to the great people of Michigan. My Justice Department and federal law enforcement announced today that they foiled a dangerous plot against the governor of Michigan. Rather than say thank you, she calls me a white supremacist while Biden and Democrats refuse to condemn Antifa, anarchists, looters, and mobs that burden down Democrat-run cities. I do not tolerate any extreme violence. Defending all Americans, even those who oppose and attack me, is what I will always do as your president. Governor Whitmer, open up your state, open up your schools, and open up your churches. Eduardo, what do you think of all this?
Yeah, I applaud Governor Whitmer because she's done what so many have wanted leaders to do: call President Trump out for the racial division and the hatred he has stoked. He has, since Charlottesville in Virginia, he has refused to condemn white supremacy. He has refused to stand with the people who are protesting for civil and human rights. Instead, he decides to say that there are good people on both sides. And you cannot equate people who are going to the governor's, to the footsteps of the governor's mansion or the state capitol armed, as they did in Michigan and in other states, when he's tweeting out, take back Michigan or free Michigan.
So Eduardo, I let you say your piece, but we got to be clear here, man. Like, these people it looks like they hate Trump just as much as they hate governor. Like I said, these are OG anti-government people. There's no indication whatsoever that they're white supremacists.
You don't really know that, Sam.
Well, no, there's literally video of the organizer saying it, so I do know it, actually.
I don't, you know what, the level of hatred and white supremacy, the different factions that have been stoked against both government and people of color in this country, that is That is at the core of what Donald Trump has done to this country since day one.
But this has nothing to do with white supremacy. That's the point that I'm making here. I mean, look, you can say liberate Michigan, anti-government. Okay, like fine.
How many people of color did you actually see on the footsteps? How many people of color armed with guns? Had you seen anyone of color with rifles at the state capitol? Then maybe we could have a conversation about that. But the racism, the anti-Semitism, all these factors against people of color in this country have pictures of white men with guns. I don't see people of color standing up to take back the state of Michigan or any other state.
Jonathan, let me get you in here. I mean, I think one of the things that we've tracked here on this show is how incredibly fraught and tense and on edge this country is. And so I think a lot of people, when they saw this plot revealed, it confirmed for them just what a scary place we're in. I mean, you have something like I saw a poll, like 70% of Americans are fearful of violence after the election results. You have majorities of Biden supporters and a plurality of Trump supporters who say that they won't accept the results effectively. If their candidate doesn't win, they won't believe that it's a legitimate election. You know, how are you, as we come down to Election Day and this incredibly tense and fraught period of time, how are you thinking about those numbers and what we may witness after Election Day?
No, I mean, this is a huge issue right now. I mean, early on in the pandemic, you had really, smart people that study the, socioeconomic landscape warning about social cohesion being torn apart. I mean, a lot of times it feels like the country is being ripped apart at the seams with these political divisions and whoever you want to blame for it. I mean, but President Trump is partly responsible. Social media is partly responsible. The political polarization that's going on, not just in Washington, but across the country. It's off the charts. And I think a lot of people are sort of bracing for, no matter who wins, you can expect that about half the country is going to be upset, and there's going to be protests in the streets, and anyone really knows whether they're going to be better or worse depending on who wins. But people
and Jonathan, one of the things that I know you've been covering as well is some of the ballot issues, the complications. We've talked about the naked ballots in Pennsylvania and the potential legal challenges, just the unusual landscape of this election, given that it's occurring during a pandemic, and given that you have a disproportionate number of Republicans who plan to vote on Election Day in person and of Democrats who plan to vote by mail. Lay on some of that for us as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're effectively running an election year experiment right now with voting. A lot of these states have moved very quickly to get out some of these mail-in absentee ballots. There's states that have a long history of doing this that have been very successful in getting these ballots out, making sure that that voters follow all the protocols and counting them quickly. There are other states that are moving very quickly to do this and don't necessarily have the experience or expertise to get up on this. So, I mean, that's another, obviously, a real fear is questions over rejected ballots in some of these states that might be very close, states that Trump won by only thousands of votes in 2016. What if there are a large number of rejected ballots and they lean toward one party, toward one racial group even? I mean, this is really, stuff that it's people that could have people doubting the outcome of the election on November 3rd.
Yeah, I think that's right. Eduardo, what do you make of that? Because we also saw like Hillary Clinton. She came out and said that Biden should not accept the defeat under any circumstances until everything is counted with mail-in ballots and more. Could lead to like a Florida 2000 situation. If you're privy to how are the Democrats thinking about how this election is going to turn out, challenging ballots and so much more?
You thought the scars from the 2000 ballot count were bad enough, and then we see what happened again in 2016, the popular vote versus the electoral vote. I think Hillary Clinton's right. This is an unprecedented time. Both sides agree it's an unprecedented time, and we see that with the historic number of mail-in ballots that have been requested, the amazing number, over 1 million votes already cast. I don't even know what the number is now, but every day people are voting already. This is no longer about election day, it's about election season. So we absolutely have to wait until every vote is counted. So the rhetoric of yesteryear, when we just accept the results on election day, that's no longer going to be the case. We have to wait and see how many votes are counted and not rush, as Al Gore did, quickly to concede that night back in 2000. Instead, he should have waited until every vote was counted. Of course, that was ultimately decided by the Secretary of State of Florida and the Supreme Court. So we'll leave that for another conversation.
Indeed.
Nightmare scenario.
Still to come, stimulus talks may have stalled, but President Trump is not allegedly opposed to another round of stimulus checks. We'll be back with more with Team Ryan.